So some people hate the classics, and I think I know why. But I also think that the one-star reviews of classic novels can tell us something about the way that people read, rather than just about the novels themselves. Today, I want to unpack some harsh critiques of misunderstood masterpieces. I'm Dr. John, I'm a literary critic, and this week's episode of Culture Decoded comes in response to the many comments I received under my Wuthering Heights video essay, a novel that's frankly hard to love for many of us. It's also my birthday today, so I thought I'd do something a little less formal this week. Okay, let's crack on with the first review. This is a one-star review of Wuthering Heights. I found it hard to read, understand, or categorize. I have no idea what the hype over this book is because it's nonsensical at best, drivel at worst. Oh dear. It's like the ramblings of a madwoman. Confusing, no sense of time or place. I had no idea which awful character was talking, what they were trying to convey. There was no plot, no theme, no story, no structure. It was like the mind of someone suffering mental illness, spewing their incoherent thoughts on the page. This is harsh criticism indeed. Even the critique included within didn't seem to be able to tell me anything about the plot, though he warned me not to read it, lest it ruin the story for me. I was still none the wiser as to what type the book should be described. It's certainly not romance. There is apparently incest, but no sex. It's reviewed as haunting and romantic, but if you think getting punched in the face by your husband, who is also apparently your brother, but sometimes the stranger who came to your house in the middle of the night seeking refuge and who likes to swear at you, is romantic, you need a psychiatrist. I mean, this is brilliant. Years ago, I had to mark undergraduate exam papers. One of the exams was about Wuthering Heights, and the response on the paper that I had to examine was, I've not read Wuthering Heights, I don't know what it's about. I hear it's confusing, but in order to not look stupid in this exam, I'm going to tell you about my life. And the student went on to write their life story, and it was so well written and hilarious. I had to speak to supervisors because I really wanted to give some kind of mark for this brilliant writing. Unfortunately, they got a 0. Okay, let's talk about Wuthering Heights. Part of the confusion of this book is that it has been portrayed to us in endless adaptations, many from Hollywood, that the book is romantic with a small r, meaning the Valentine's Day love story. And in fact, the new adaptation of Wuthering Heights, I did a video on the recently released trailer. The problem with these adaptations is that they portray the book as a love story and as a romantic with a small r story, which it absolutely is not. It's not a love story. It's not romantic in the sense of Valentine's Day. It is a romantic with a capital R, gothic, revenge tragedy. So it's a completely different book to the one that you're expecting it to be, if that's your expectation. I mean, it is a genre-defying and defining book, the gothic romance novel with a capital R. So the difference here, of course, is that this was a book inspired by the Romantic movement in poetry. Poets such as Blake and Wordsworth and Keats, and especially Lord Byron. And their view of human nature and of the natural world and humanity within this natural world often included acts of extreme violence and sexual promiscuity. Byron was rumored to have slept with his own sister. And this character gives us a kind of a template that Emily Bronte probably used in developing the idea of Heathcliff. Heathcliff is not a romantic with a small r, nor is he a lovable character, and no critic claims that he is. He is, however, a romantic with a capital R hero, in that he's a strong male lead who is clearly influenced by the Gothic and Romantic movements in literature and poetry. The Romantic movement liked to put humanity within the context of an often violent, tempestuous, and ever-changing theatre of nature. And so we have this view of the natural man or the natural woman who will often display the most awful characteristics. And the question that's being posed is, how natural are we? Are we like the natural world and the flora, fauna, and weather cycles within it that do not seem to obey the kinds of laws of morality and propriety that we adhere to? This came on the heels of the Enlightenment and ideas of humanism, where morality and propriety are a force that is placed upon humankind. But if we remove that, what kind of creature do we have? And that's some of the questions that are being posed in romantic poetry and novels, Gothic novels such as Wuthering Heights. But unfortunately, Heathcliff is often remembered as a romantic with small r character, which he absolutely is not. And it's one of the frustrations of the critics of the novel, those that have analysed the novel deeply, find it very frustrating that modern portrayals and adaptations of the book seem to portray it in a completely different light, as if to excuse the kind of absolute terrible behavior that he imposes upon those around him in this revenge tragedy. So what's there to love about Wuthering Heights? Well, those that are drawn to its historical context will know that it was a groundbreaking novel, and a debut novel at that. I think Emily drew from romantic poetry, particularly the writings of Lord Byron and the early poetry of Wordsworth, and looked at human nature and nature in general, and gave us a complex and difficult story and set of characters that are clearly fallible, are clearly difficult to like, let alone love, and a story that defies convention. And for that reason, it's hailed as a masterpiece, because a generation before, people were reading Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility. And what Emily Bronte did was kick the doors of poetic license open and imbue the novel with a completely different kind of energy. It was a critical failure at first. It's taken a long time for it to find its audience. But I think now it's looked upon as a masterpiece for those reasons. So if you're opening the book Wuthering Heights hoping to find a romantic love story, you are going to be disappointed. Okay, the next one-star review is of Shakespeare's Sonnets. He's like the M. Night Shyamalan of sonnets. If all the lines are addressing some emotion and taking you down a road to feeling what the author is feeling, that is exactly what should be happening. But when the last two lines of the sonnet go into a completely different direction, I feel like I just wasted my time and energy. I feel led astray and tricked. As a device, it's clever the first time, but just like the boy who cried wolf, it lost its charm and all of my trust. I just can't invest emotionally when I've been taught that you're going to pull the rug from under me. So this is an interesting criticism of the sonnets, and to some degree I do feel for this reader. This is a trick that happens in the poetic form of the sonnet. But you have to understand what the sonnet is trying to accomplish. The sonnet came to England from Italy, where its master was Petrarch. Petrarch engineered and mastered this poetic form that's written in 14 lines. You have an initial grouping of lines called the octave, followed by the sestet, so 8 lines followed by 6 lines. And the turning point in between those lines, a little over halfway through, is called the volta. And the volta is the shift in perspective. So you might have a sonnet that begins with 8 lines of how beautiful and attractive the beloved lady is, followed by 6 lines that lament the fact that she's unobtainable and she causes me pain and torment, and I can't sleep, I can't eat. And so it's a shift in perspective, that she is life-giving in the opening of the sonnet, but then also life-destroying in the final part of the sonnet. So this volta is a very important component of the sonnet form. By the time it came to England and was in the hands of people like Sir Philip Sidney and Edmund Spenser, and then later William Shakespeare, the English poets attempted to push this volta later and later in the sonnet, as if to amplify the force of the initial argument or perspective. Knowing that this change, this switch is going to come, means that the reader is reading a powerful argument from one perspective, thinking, well, where's the shift going to come? Where's the volta? In Shakespeare's sonnets, many of those sonnets don't have the volta until even the final couplet or the final line of the couplet, where everything is switched on its head and we see the different perspective. Part of this comes from Shakespeare's education, where as a schoolboy he would have been taught the art of rhetoric, of persuasive argument, where school children were given the assignment to write a persuasive argument from one perspective in the morning, and then in the afternoon write an equally forceful argument opposing that view in the afternoon. This is something that we can see in Shakespeare's plays. He's adept at giving forcefully one perspective, persuasively and dramatically, being able to then turn that perspective on its head. And this is what the sonnets do. The sonnets are what one critic called mini laboratories of human desire, and how often human desire is in conflict with itself is something that the sonnets are trying to teach us. So I do understand the frustration, but the volta is an essential component of this poetic form. It's something that English poets like William Shakespeare were experimenting with and pushing further and further to the end of the sonnet to flip things on its head and give us the opposing view. Human emotions are not on monorails. The problem is that we can both be the rock and the wave crashing against it, in conflict with ourselves and frustrated in our ambitions. It's the very thing that the sonnets are about. Okay, let's look at the third of our one-star reviews. This is about Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse. Recipe for a shitty book. 3 parts overwriting, 2 parts no plot, 5 parts steady stream of nonsensical, idiotic, very stupid thought that pops into any character's head. 1 or 2 psychotic breakdowns, 3 parts ever-shifting perspective, 10 parts run-on sentences. At the bottom of the page it was signed Virginia Woolf. I was amazed, to say the least, but I didn't understand the recipe. I put it out of my mind and dove headfirst into the manuscript. As I finished the last page, I finally understood the recipe. Mrs. Woolf had indeed perfected a shitty book. Also, what is wrong with you people? Is Virginia Woolf's reanimated corpse holding a gun to your head as you give her 5 stars? Am I insane? Am I missing something? To the Lighthouse is the equivalent of something that's trivial, harmless, but very, very unpleasant, an experience you don't want to repeat, like eating chicken with no seasoning boiled in milk, like scooping up the white mush that comes out of your sink's disposal and sticking it in your mouth. Oh my God. Like stepping in glue with your socks on. Sure, none of it's going to kill you, but it's going to be a bad time in the grand scheme of things, and you'll learn exactly one lesson from it: to not repeat this experience. Well, that's quite a review, and bravo, fantastic writing. You really conveyed your feelings with eloquence and vividness. So yes, this is an understandable experience if your first reading of this type of modernist literature is Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse, and although it's charming to think of reading the handwritten manuscript signed by her in a hotel room with the rain outside, none of that scenario is going to help you understand and appreciate this novel. To the Lighthouse is a modernist novel, and it's a period of time in literary creativity where writers were starting to experiment with narrative. There's lots of reasons for this. There's a theoretical basis for this kind of writing, and that is to examine what is a narrator. Is a narrator a godlike figure that's able to peer into all of the characters' minds and thoughts and dreams? Or is a narrator another character, voiced by the author and animated by them, but someone who wanders through the novel like a detective, picking up clues here and there? If you're accustomed to standard narration, you're going to find this kind of experience bewildering at first. I think we all do, certainly. On first reading, a book like To the Lighthouse or James Joyce's Ulysses is difficult to understand. Who is speaking? How do they know this? Where am I? And what's going on? But what they're experimenting with here is a type of narration where we are able to jump from one person's thoughts to another person's thoughts, from one person's speech to another person's speech, so that what is generated is a combined total experience of this moment in time. And time is a crucial element in modernist literature. I mean, if you think about it, Einstein had been developing a very different view of the complexities of time. And some of these thoughts were filtering through into mainstream culture. Those that were interested in this concept understood that the moment in time is not something that can be easily conveyed from one person's perspective, that time is essentially much more strange than any of us had really understood before. And so what's happening here is you may have a snapshot of a family on a beach having a picnic, looking at the lighthouse, but instead of getting one person's perspective, you're going to get a kind of a roaming drone-like experience of a collection of people's thoughts, feelings, impressions, and speech. And so what's conveyed to you is an overall impression, an overall idea of this snapshot or this moment, with different voices and different thoughts emerging and popping up. With time, you do get to appreciate the artistry of this kind of narration, but I completely admit it is a confusing and bewildering experience if you go into it blind. Okay, the next one-star review is of Shakespeare's Hamlet. You know what I wish? I wish the whiny-ass characters in Hamlet would shut up for once. Just shut up, I wanted to yell by the end. Shut the hell up, stop talking, I'm sick of it. And I am. I'm sick of it. Shakespeare's contribution to the English language is irrelevant. Wow, harsh criticism. As is the obsession of teaching and acting his plays centuries after his death. I'm reviewing Hamlet based on the work itself, and the work is schlock. Utter schlock. What a great word. Makes a pass through the arras. Polonius. Behind. Oh, I am slain. Falls and dies. Are you kidding me? That's the death scene? Oh, I am slain. Are you kidding me? Oh, and fancy this. You'll know that the whole to be or not to be thing, that famous line embedded in our culture, the harrowing question of whether it's better to kill yourself or keep on living, Hamlet walks into a room and randomly says it. I kid you not, there's no setup to the line, no logical reason Hamlet would even say it. He just does. This is the story. Hamlet sees father's ghost. The ghost says he was killed by Hamlet's uncle. Hamlet proceeds to go mad. We never actually see him go mad. We're simply told that he does. And then there's a lot of talking. Hamlet talks to the king, his uncle, Ophelia, Horatio, and others. Eventually, Hamlet kills a guy called Polonius or something. And I guess that's supposed to be tragic, but it's more comical than anything. The fact I'm supposed to take these characters seriously is hilarious. And then Hamlet kills some more people, but whatever, who cares? Everyone is so bland and boring, it doesn't matter. Okay, harsh criticism of the greatest play ever written. Where do we start with this? Well, okay, so Hamlet is a revenge tragedy. And to understand it in its context, it's kind of a reworking of an earlier play, also called Hamlet, that we don't have a copy of now, but we know existed, and also a play called The Spanish Tragedy. The revenge tragedy genre was incredibly popular at the time. And so people had some level of expectation of how this was going to be handled, what kind of events we're going to see, where it's going to go. A kind of context that maybe we do not have as we go into reading this play. And yes, there's a lot of talking, but that's understandable. It is a play, it's not a novel. We don't have any of the kind of scene setting that you would expect in a novel. All we have is the speech itself that's given by various characters. The first edition of Hamlet was probably recited by a disgruntled actor who went to a publisher, regurgitated the lines to the publisher, and got the thing printed and was selling it, making money from this enterprise. Not done with Shakespeare's knowledge or authorization. That's why we have different versions of the early publications of the plays. It's not till the 1623 edition that came after Shakespeare's death that we have something like an official version. But nevertheless, I digress. These are plays that are meant, of course, to be performed. And it's in the performing of these plays that you're going to get a real appreciation. If it's a film version like Kenneth Branagh's or one of the many others, then you're going to get more of the scene setting and understand more about what's going on, obviously. You're reading essentially a script. Another thing to bear in mind is that Hamlet was groundbreaking in that it gave us some access to the psychology of Hamlet. The idea of looking towards the inward person and their inner thoughts and troubles and these kinds of monologues that he gives was kind of a new addition to the literary landscape. We really didn't have something akin to this level of introspection in earlier work. Now, introspection's always happened, of course, but thanks to the influence of some of the earlier Greek, classical Greek texts that had come across after the fall of Constantinople, access to ancient Greek wisdom texts and understandings made it across Europe, eventually to England. So we have works like Aristotle's Poetics and works by Plato being translated into English for the first time about a generation or so before Shakespeare is writing. These were highly influential, and they opened up a new way of looking at interiority and at psychology, and also a level of philosophy of what is the moral or right thing to do if you're called upon to do something that you want to do but simultaneously repulses you. And Hamlet is the absolute perfect example of a character who is captured in stasis, in paralysis. He has an inability to act upon what he believes he should do. Whether he was actually mad or not, or feigning, pretending his madness, has been the subject of critical analysis ever since the play was written. And it goes on today. But if you understand a little more about the context, I think the reading of Hamlet can give you a finer appreciation for what's happening here. But watch the play, watch a film version. I think you'll get more from it, and then reading it will make more sense. Okay, so the next review is of Macbeth. Macbeth is a dumb book. Only psycho people would like it, because all it is a plot to go and kill people so that Macbeth can become king. I feel like Lady Macbeth was a really ugly chick. I mean, yeah, I think that's part of the point. We're not meant to like Lady Macbeth, I don't think. In fact, I think this is an interesting point about a number of these criticisms. We could say the same about Wuthering Heights. We're not really meant to like Heathcliff or even Cathy. We're not meant to like Hamlet, and we're certainly not meant to like Macbeth or Lady Macbeth. But that doesn't mean that we can't be entertained and informed to some degree about human nature by them and by the storytelling. So if we're looking for characters that we can like and that we'd like to sit down and chat with and have a drink and a chat, then this kind of writing is really not for you. So yeah, Macbeth was to some degree an ugly chick. I'm not sure why I think that, but I do. Well, you're onto something. She was very unpleasant, that is true. I really hate how the book is written in Old English. It pisses me off. Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are really stupid people because they had a guilty conscience about killing all of those innocent people. Yes, that's true. A lot of the play is about the handling of guilt and what guilt does to your soul, to your mind. The key characters um, do this despicable act in their lust for power and are then punished, not by the gods or the heavens, but by interiority. Another theme that comes up in the plays of Shakespeare is what we think of ourselves within ourselves. It's a key theme in humanism. The gods aren't punishing Macbeth here. There is some supernatural element with the witches and the predictions that they make, But Macbeth's real struggle and pain seems to come from his own mind. So you're right, they had a guilty conscience. The ideas that they came up with to kill all of those people were terrible. That was a terrible decision. My little brother could have come up with better ideas. What can I say? We need your little brother in this world. I also don't see what is so important about being a king, especially since they already lived in a castle. I get what you're saying. They already had a castle. Isn't that good enough? I guess part of the story of Macbeth is that nothing is good enough. They lust for power beyond their capacity to morally obtain that power, and that is their central problem. I think understanding a little bit more about the context of why we're reading a tragedy where there's a lot of blood and lust for power. We might think about the history of when Macbeth was written and performed and what was happening in British English politics in the English court at the time. Shakespeare and other writers were able to say things through allegory and stories like Macbeth and Hamlet without having to speak directly in something like a pamphlet where they would just put their political, social views down, their philosophy down in black and white. The element of storytelling and drama gives us insights into human nature that perhaps are more accessible to us, understandable, if we can relate or not relate to characters. And I think that's really the key point that we're trying to make here about the Shakespeare's plays, is that they enable us to examine ourselves and humanity and human nature in a way that a dry political statement simply doesn't call upon us to reflect in that way. One of the things I'll say in closing about this kind of criticism is that as a literary critic, I tend to approach these wanting to know what is different, what is being subverted, challenged, or changed by this writing that was not there before. I mean, I remember as a child, I wanted to know from my dad, what was it like to first hear Elvis Presley's music or the Beatles' music? My kids would ask me the same question about what was it like to hear hip-hop music at first. And that's the kind of question that I bring when I read something from the past. I want to know, what is it that Emily Bronte or Shakespeare or Charles Dickens is doing with this story that was not done in this way before? How does it challenge conventions? How does it upend expectations? How does it build those expectations and then flip them on me? And I get a lot of enjoyment from that process. I like to have my expectations challenged and to try and experience these novels to a degree how they would have been experienced by those that first read them. Some of them are shocking, some of them are painful in places, but there's always a lesson there about human nature and about our place in the world. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please click like and subscribe if you want to get next week's episode of Culture Decoded, and leave me any comments that you like about novels or poetry that you find challenging that you'd like me to cover in future video essays. Happy birthday to me, and thank you for watching.